If they locked us up in here with a packet of dammy Dodgers, I might have believed Paul Ham was one of the good guys. But Rice Tea? Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the final quick read novel, The Silurian Gift, written by Mike Tucker. Now, yeah, this is the final quick read book. I don't know why they stopped making them. It's a crying shame, because as somebody who does struggle with their reading, these books were very helpful to me. So yeah, it was kind of sad that these weren't being made again. But let's talk about the writer, because this is the first book that this is the first book that we'll be talking about, written by Mike Tucker. Mike Tucker actually has a very extensive work on Doctor Who. He was a model special effects assistant during the 7th Doctor era, starting, I believe his first story was Delta and the Bannermen. The less said about that story, the better. But he did like the pyrokinetics, the explosions and stuff, as well as a lot of the model work. And some of his greatest works can be seen in the 7th Doctor's final seasons, with stories like Ghostlight, Survival, Curse of Fenric, and Battlefield, which is all of them actually, now that I mention it. Some of his work really paid off. Then, when Doctor Who went on its hiatus after 1989, he actually became a writer and had written many novels in Doctor Who, specifically for the 7th Doctor. Then, when the show came back in 2005, Mike Tucker was the first person to have worked on both the classic series and the revived series, as he also produced the special effect works all the way up to, I don't know when he stopped. Even if he stopped, he might still be going, but I know he did make it up to at least the Day of the Doctor, to which he actually won an award for, if I remember correctly. So, and he's also written for other modern Doctors as well, but this is his only work in the quick read range, so that's really cool. And I think you could really feel his passion for it, and especially in this novel, which also not only sees the return of the Silurians, a race from the 1970s story, The Silurians, as well as the Sea Devils and Warriors of the Deep, but they also appeared in the Chris Chibnall written story Cold Blood and Hungry Earth, with a semi-linkage to the story Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. They've been one of the main staples in Doctor Who history, basically a race of reptilian people that lived on Earth prior to human beings, and they basically put themselves into hibernation, waiting for when the planet would be suitable for them to become rulers again. However, because we humans are now in the way, that's where usually most of the conflict happens, and that's usually what that's usually what a Silurian story is. It's a diplomacy story. For those of you who don't know, a diplomacy story is a story I coined it myself, but there's a lot of episodes on Doctor Who that are like this, when the Doctor gets caught in between two fractions of species. Usually none of them are either good or bad, but you have good and bad members in each party, and there's this conflict, this civil war, and the Doctor basically has to try and balance out, tries to fix things as best as he can. And the Silurians are a perfect remedy for that kind of storytelling. But this is what I'm talking about when I say Mike Tucker really knows his Doctor Who stuff, because it doesn't just bring back the main Silurians, but it also brings back the Sea Devils, a offspring, the cousins of the main Silurian race. It is important to note that in the revived era of Doctor Who, the Silurians have been given a drastically different design, and are usually referred to as Homo reptilia. So fans like myself have named the three different species. You've got the main Silurians, you've got the Sea Devils, and you've got the Homo reptilia, which this story, going by the cover, features those. But as well, and I don't know if you can spot it on the cover, it's not a very great photo, but this story also also features the return of the Melker, the dinosaur-like race that appeared in the 1983 story, Warriors of the Deep. A story that was critically panned, and one of the things it was panned for was the fact of the Melker and their design and how terribly they were written and they were processed into the scene, with one of the most embarrassing scenes in that story being this woman fighting the Melker only to karate chop it to get electrocuted, and that one clip actually got Doctor Who cancelled in the late 1980s. So it is very strange to see them return in a quick read novel, which is mainly targeted to like younger audience who might not even know about this. But at this point in Doctor Who history, with the 11th Doctor and Stephen Moffat, it was gearing towards really geeky fans who knows the in and outs of the canonicity of Doctor Who and the mythology of the Whoniverse. So it doesn't feel that out of strange for this particular Doctor. Also as well, according by the cover, you might notice that in this cover, the Doctor is wearing a different costume. Originally, when this story was announced and it had and the cover was revealed, the Doctor's actually wearing his costume from Series 6, his normal tweed, particularly the tweed from Series 6, and in the earlier half of Series 7, and that was the design of it, and when the story got released, the cover actually had a green variation on the costume that he would wear in the 2012 and 2013 Christmas specials. Sadly, that's not actually integrated into the story. The story itself specifically points out that he's wearing his usual tweed. So why they've changed the cover, why did they do this? I have absolutely no idea. But yeah, so that's all like the behind the scenes and stuff. These quick read novels aren't very that popular, so I don't really know the main opinions on this in terms of a mainstream audience for this kind of novel. But the fact that it's the last, I don't know if that means it was critically panned or anything, but you know, I actually have no idea. So really just to get to the basics of the story, the Doctor uses his influence in UNIT to get inside a organisation. He pretends to be like a journalist working for someone. He got his ties in UNIT because he discovered this man named Pelham and his corporation of Pel Corp, a radical energy-based organisation that believes that they have discovered a completely new, safe and 100% climate change-free fuel source known as the fire ice, which they have tracked down in Antarctica. And the Doctor finds this very strange, very odd, and it doesn't really match up with what he knows about the timeline. So he's basically investigating Pelham. But at this time, another journalist, a woman named Lizzie, pretends to be the Doctor's assistant, and they kind of get this feeling that they both know that they're not really know each other, because she says that she's the Doctor's assistant, and the Doctor just kind of runs with it, but he gets this feeling that she knows what she's talking about, and she has this kind, adventurous spirit about her, which gives Lizzie basically the one-off companion feel. She is essentially the companion in this story, and basically then they go to Antarctica, to this base where they learn about the fire ice, and the Doctor and Lizzie uncover a conspiracy where it turns out that Pelham has captured and enslaved a group of Silurians who are cold-blooded race, which means they usually adapt to more warmer environments. So them waking up in Antarctica with all the snow and all of the freezing temperatures is very, very bad for them, and puts them in a very vulnerable state. which actually gives the story a very unique feel. The first time we see a Silurian, when the Doctor he overhears Paul Hams and him and Lizzie go to investigate and they discover the Silurians, they're the most charming individuals in the entire story. The main Silurian that we get in, there's two main Silurians we get introduced. I'm not really sure how their names are pronounced. When I read it, I pronounced their names as Okol and Parkour. However, I don't think that's their actual name, so I'm just going to call them the father and the daughter. And the father is the first Silurian that we introduce, and he's this scientist who actually thinks that a relationship with the humans is the way to go. And essentially, Paul Ham used this to gain leverage on them, and it's basically like teasing them. It's like, right, you want a nice relationship with the humans of Earth? Okay, let me all of your secret fuel source of this fire ice. I will bring it out to the world, and then maybe later on I would let you reveal yourselves to the public, where we will then integrate humanity. Of course, Paul Ham doesn't really have plans to do that. But then we also have the daughter character, who's actually, she was believed to be dead at the start of the story when Paul Ham chucks her out into the dying snow. However, she quickly found some really warm clothing, and she found some of the hibernation units of the Silurian military, reawakening not only the Sea Devils, again making their first appearance since Warriors of the Deep, but also the Melka, who made their first appearance and their only televised appearance in Fury of the Deep. So what's really strange about this story is that it is a semi-sequel to sorts to Warriors of the Deep. In fact, it deals with many themes similar to that story. Both organizations are based mainly on military and the selfishness, the ego-ness of owning this vast amount of power source, a military force. With this being the fire ice, and then War of the Deep, I can't even remember. It's like a nuclear power source or something like that. And they basically, because of that, the situation has gotten higher. It's gotten worse to be diplomatic in this situation than it would normally. And so that's basically the main presence, the main focus of the narrative. And for the most part, it's an alright story. There's nothing much to it. The Doctor has a really nice friendly relationship with the father Silurian, and Paul Ham is an okay villain. He is kind of a mustache twirling, ha ha ha, I'm going to get away with this. I'm the one who controls all the power source and stuff. But there are some nice little twists and turns that keep the story engaging. One of my favourites, by far, is the twist on Lizzie. Throughout the first half of the story, you are meant to believe that she's just this really innocent journalist. She sneaks on board, she pretends to be the Doctor's assistant, but in reality, she's this journalist. In the reality of the Doctor's point of view, she's just actually this energetic journalist who wants to basically break this story before anyone else. But then we learn slowly that she has much more sinister intent. We see her deliberately avoiding anybody's perception and tries to find a particular room within the Antarctic Pole Corps base. And later on, we basically learn that she is an eco-terrorist of sorts, and she basically plans to blow her and everyone else here up just to stop Paul Ham, who, because she claims that, like, they didn't really, this power source could be used for dangerous, and Paul Ham and his researchers prior to this event have done research on fuel and stuff, which has harmed a bit of the economy, but mainly like global warming and the environment to an extent, and they have very little care, they have very little consideration for the natural world. And so she is this eco-terrorist that planned when coming into this situation to essentially just blow everything up, and she kind of terrified because she's kind of new to all this, and she doesn't really know. She's still young essentially, and only for the Doctor then to calm her down. But it keeps the story nice and engaging because you really thought that you get a grasp of this character, but no, you think that she's just your average run-of-the-mill type of companion, but the story does a great job at making you believe that for the first half until that twist arrives. And the fact that you didn't even know that you were looking for a twist makes it even more effective. Now, the Silurians are very well handled here. You've got the idea of, you've got some good ones, you've got some bad ones with the daughter Silurian basically going up to get revenge. She wants this planet. She doesn't understand why she should be considered any less or equal to these humans. She at one point poisons the fire cold fuel so that instead of having a very minimal effect on the environment, it will actually do the reverse and cause a global phenomenon which would basically kill all of humanity if the fuel is let out onto the world. And that's where one of the big dilemmas is in the story. And she basically is filled up of revenge and hatred. She even states at one point that one of the things that keeps her going, what kept her alive from the horrible cold, is because of her hatred for humanity. And again, the story does a great job at balancing all of these characters. You've got the good human with Lizzie, you've got the bad human with Polham, you've got the good Silurian with the father figure, you've got the bad Silurian with the daughter character, and each of them as well have these men underlining them, people underlining them, which are kind of like stuck in the middle in a sense. You don't really learn much about human characters because I think that namely they are less interesting. We get here of this General Turner character, however there's not much of him here. He gets like a scene or two. It's pretty underwhelming. But for the Silurians, you get the General of the Sea Devils, and I love the scenes with him because you get to see his thought process where he's like, he does not really have much of an interest on whether they survive or conquer the humans. He is a general just following orders, and he wants basically war to be war. He wants to know and understand. So when he is basically planning on his assault on the human bases, he knows what he has to do. He knows his orders to attack the humans, but use as minimal amount of damage to the humans as possible. Let them escape. But inside, he is kind of like, war is war. There's going to be casualties. Why should I try and make the casualties as least as possible? I'm a soldier first, and the orders I'm getting are very conflicting and don't line up with my soldiers' duties. So in a way, he's kind of power hungry. In a way, he's a villain as well. And there's only really that one Silurian. However, the story does a good job at going through his thought processes and basically stating that his deal has nothing to do with the actual humans themselves, but rather just the idea of being in the Sea Devils military command. But the Doctor spends most of his time with the Silurians. Lizzie spends most of her time on the surface of Antarctica. She is witnessed in the battle. She then also captures Paul Hammond, his assistant Matt, which I keep thinking is a reference to Matt Smith. So when I was reading this Matt character, I was giving him a similar voice to the Doctor, which is really confusing. But essentially, the story does a great job at back of the ranch storytelling when you got the Doctor telling the Silurian's point of view and you have Lizzie telling the human's point of view, and because of that you get a great wider scope of the narrative, and you really do generally feel that when the war breaks out there are a lot of casualties, there are a lot of danger. And I also kind of like the daughter's plan. Essentially, she knows that with the small amount of army, a small amount of force, they can't really going to stop the humans. They're just going to keep piling and piling up on them. So essentially what she has done is she has poisoned the things that they want, sent out a military attack, not enough to kill or wound them to the point where they will abandon all hope of this base, but enough to try and push them further, to try and get this system of the fire ice out into the world a lot quicker, because they're being attacked. You want to get in a rush for something. But it's actually a really great plan, and the story does a great job at grounding that and making it feel real. And the fact that the Doctor tries to bargain and reason and tries to negotiate with the daughter Silurian makes her much more compelling than I feel like she actually is on her own. She does kind of come off as like Pearlham, a mustache-twirling character, until the Doctor kind of basically tries to convince her, tries to encourage her to do better, to be better. Of course, that's not always the case, as of course we don't live in a world with Silurians all over the place, so the Doctor essentially has to make up the plan, like most Silurian stories, where the Silurians have to go back into hibernation and all that. Now, let's talk about one of the big factors of the story, one of the reasons why the story was so noticeable when it came out, and that is the inclusion of the Melka. When they appear in the story, it's like a twist. They start slashing and tearing down the building out of nowhere, and then the Doctor's like, I recognise this creature. It's a Melka, a genetically enhanced creature from the Jurassic period with the Silurians, and they've basically cybernetically enhanced them to be not animalistic, but they can be guided. Their viciousness can be guided to the sorts where they can attack and harm individuals. Now, when they're in the story, they have a great presence, and they just tear up stuff, and you get these great action scenes written down detailing how basically weapons, guns at this point in the timeline do very little, if not no damage at all to the Melka, and we actually get to see an army of Melkas. Am I pronouncing it in the right? Melkas? I'm pretty sure the Melka is a name for something else. No, it must be the Silurians. My brain has gone all fuzzy all of a sudden. And one of the big action pieces is the Doctor trying to stop this army of Melka basically rising up from underneath the ice. But their scenes are mainly locked down. When they're not in the story, you don't really get the presence for them. They don't get talked enough by the rest of the crew. They're not like, okay, one of the big factors of the story is that we got to deal with the Melka. The Melka, when not in the actual scene, not in presence, are just a weaponary force for the Silurians, which I guess they were always kind of, but it is kind of strange because that's one of the big noticeable things in this story. But they do have a lot of great scenes detailing their attack, their vicious claws, and they do get a few kills, which I'm happy to announce. I believe they kill Matt. And Pearlham after that becomes kind of like, I've gone too far, we've got to stop all this, we've got to shut down the base, and the fire ice has got to stay here on the base, and we'll destroy the base so that nobody can find this fire ice again. And the story actually ends on this bit of somber note, where our characters escape on the helicopter, with the exception of the Silurians that go back into hibernation, and they essentially use the bomb that Lizzie was going to use to destroy vital components in the Antarctic base so that it's unusable. Then nobody can come back and track down the Melka, the Silurians, the Sea Devils, and their very useful power source ever again. And our characters are kind of just like, they're in this helicopter and they're reflecting on their lives, and the Doctor makes a really stupid and out of character decision to put to suggest that Pelham should work with the terrorist, eco-terrorist group, mainly because he's got money, but because of the story, he might have renounced his evil ways, which I guess that's what the story was going for, especially after the death of Matt. But the majority of the story, he was a mustache-twirling villain until that point, which is near the end. So it didn't really fit with me. The ending actually reminds me a bit of Jurassic Park, the first Jurassic Park movie, where they're in a helicopter and all our characters are kind of looking and then reflecting on the story, and it's not exactly happy, but they're just glad, but they are glad to have survived this encounter. And this does kind of leave the Doctor in a much more darker, much more down to earth environment in his head. So that could be headcanon wise what leads him at the start of the story, in the next story, canon wise to us, why he was in that headspace, mourning the ponds, and is basically like, right, I've done what the universe, I've done so much for the universe, and the universe doesn't care kind of atmosphere. So you can kind of put that into this story. That's what I'm doing anyway. It's canon. It's my head canon. And that's the Silurian gift. So overall, it's a really good story. It is a bit generic in most points. The story beats of this diplomatic storyline has been done before and has been done better. I think one of the main issues with the story is that it's too short. We don't really see viewpoints as we should. You have good characters and bad characters, but there's very little grey area, and for all the good and bad, we never really get a good grasp at, especially on the humans' point of view, on why they dislike the enemies of so much. The Silurians really have a great strong point, and anything to deal with them really strong in the narrative. I feel like Pelham might be a bit cliched, a bit money. I want money and profits, without very little care for the Silurians. And Lizzie is a great character, and the story keeps her nice and engaging, and I really did like her as this one-off companion, but you can tell that she's kind of a one-off companion. The Doctor is also very well realised in this story, and yeah, it's a pretty decent story. Not amazing, not particularly great. I still prefer Magic of the Angels by far, but overall, pretty decent story. I recommend it. I highly recommend it. But if you're interested, if you're a Silurian fan, I say go check it out. So there you go. That's the Silurian Gift, written by Mike Tucker. So join me next time, where the Doctor goes from one snowy environment to another as he finds himself in a Christmas time in Victorian London, as the Patronotragam are there to trying to encourage him to get involved in the mystery of a Mr. Simon and his dealings with the snow, as a new companion, a new face for the franchise comes to the Doctor. So join me next time for The Snowmen, as well as prequel episodes, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!